So this episode, we're going to delve into some ideas around the CA, around professionalism, and really the main skill that Pieter has shown me, which is judgment, learning how to critically think. It's easy in words, but I mean, you can see it in those tests. It's a lot harder in practice. So,
well, I won't say I taught you. We discovered the importance of judgment.
We discovered the importance of judgment, and we are discovering.
Yes,
I think it's a big one. It's a huge one, and I hope you guys enjoy. Welcome back, my people. This is the road to CA. It's yours, it's mine, it's ours. This is where we look back, we look within, and we look beyond in the hopes that it will not end, but that it will begin in CASA. Today, we're joined with a true talent. I truly believe, fortunately, not a talent wasted, but he's a talent on his way. And obviously on the road. Obviously.
Hard on the road.
Hard.
Oh, there's potholes, but we'll make it.
Plenty of potholes. He isn't just a stellar academic, but he's a keen programmer. And I was shook by this one. He's also an award-winning pianist. That really shook me, to be honest.
Everyone needs a hobby.
And you're about to meet a real legend in the making. Someone who codes, coaches, and creates. Inspiring us, and I'd certainly say inspiring me to push beyond boundaries. I really believe. Pieter, how are you, man?
Long day?
Yeah.
But ready to explore.
There's this interesting philosophy. So a guy that I really admire, he's the host of A Diary of a CEO. It's a podcast on YouTube. Stephen Bartlett.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of them.
It's like a self-improvement podcast. They talk about neuroscience and personal development and how to be your best self in so many ways, in relationships and psychology and so many things. He wrote this book based off of all the interviews he'd done, based off of all of the experiences he'd had and the success that he obtained, called The Diary of a CEO, 33 Laws of Business and Life. And one of the laws is it's a philosophical law, is you must sweat the small stuff. So oftentimes people are like, oh, don't be a perfectionist, right? So at all times I believe there's just always going to be contradicting truths. I think there really are truths that just are so contradictory, but they genuinely are true. So as much as perfectionism does prevent you from progressing, if you like always get it perfect.
Perfectionism is the enemy of progress, something like that. Yeah.
Perfection is the enemy of progress.
Yes,
like if you are doing an accounting exercise, if you're doing questions, you've got to focus on the mistakes. You've got to lean into the mistakes and lean into getting it wrong and saying, okay, I got this wrong. How can I get it right? You've got to lean into imperfection. So that's where perfectionism isn't great.
But I think that type of perfectionism isn't necessarily that's not necessarily created the same, if I can say it that way.
Okay.
Because leaning into a mistake is different from leaning so much into a mistake so that you obsess over that mistake.
Yeah.
And you never get to anything else.
Yeah.
So there's a point where you need to think, accounting-wise, you need to think materiality. Not proud of it, if any of my students are watching, but you scan through your slides and there's like this little note, and there's a small chance they're going to ask you the test. If they do, it's going to be like 1 mark. I'm not even going to bother, right? So that's sort of, you are valuing the time it's going to take to remember that forever, less than that time itself, using that to learn something else. So I am sort of fine not getting 100 or not even getting a 95 or something. Just always strive for way above what you're actually going to get, but I'm fine for not striving for absolute perfection over using your time to actually study the material. I think a lot of students, and I've caught myself doing it, and I become angry at myself, but we think from test to test. Like I did that today. I'm like, oh, this thing isn't in the we interest risk. Okay, it's not the test for CV2 I'm writing Monday. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm not even going to touch that. I'm going to do all the rest, study for Monday, everything else in FPS, and I'll touch on it later. And then the argument is, if I come back to it, will I be able to really understand it? You know, sometimes you sort of think you understand it and you get past the test and you did okay in the test and you're like, okay, I'm fine. Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be a CA who's not going to have the knowledge. Yeah. You're here for the knowledge. The test is secondary. Like, don't study. So small things, especially small things you can look up. I'm like, I'm not too worried about the small thing, because when you're a CA one day, you're going to be like, oh, there's something here. Let's call in the expert. Let's grab the, let's Google. Let's use AI. You know, I'm going to know where to go find information. It's much more important to actually understand the foundation of everything, because that is like the purpose. Why does it help you pass the test, but you can't be a CA? If that makes sense.
If you can't actually apply in life, not in paper, in life. The nice thing though is that a lot of this simulation is what we're gonna do. Literally,
it's very close.
It's very close. Yes. Especially like with knowledge workers, it's gonna tend to be close. Like if you're an engineer, if you're an architect, people who use their brains.
Yes.
Or what do you think about that?
Engineering, I know, is a jump, and most degrees are a jump because of testing. In the ideal world, you would have 10 students, you teach them all the information, and you would have a sit down with a student and spend a lot of time assessing how well you know the knowledge. I would ask you different types of questions, different types of scenarios. I'm like, okay, you really understand the work you are passing. We don't have that luxury because we do have so many students who want this degree. Okay? Yes. So we need to standardize the things in order to test it, to put a number to it. Okay. So I had an argument with one of my friends. She didn't do very great in the test. And I tried to explain to her, you are perhaps the smartest person I know. I sometimes look at something, I'm like, I'm not sure what goes on here. And I would WhatsApp her and just send her a voice note, like, I don't understand this section. And she's like, oh no, 2 lectures or last year they mentioned something, there's an exception in this IAS standard which essentially tries to maximize this. And because of that, that essentially cancels out. And I'm like, the knowledge to just at a drop of a hat be able to say, I can ask you a question and you can give me a relevant answer. Right. But now you get in the test, and the test has a specific question and a specific memo. And usually the memo is list this bullet points. Right? Less discussion questions, CTA style. Think more first year. It's like list the 5 these things. That doesn't prove you know anything. But 5 things is easy to mark. Oh, you got 5 right, you got 4 right, you only got 2 right, you got 3 right. But if you accidentally read the question wrong, and you get a 20% in your test instead of a 70% because you did the wrong required, does that mean you only knew 20% of the work? No. So your mark is supposed to say, how good did you understand the work? But it isn't perfect. And I think, especially in knowledge-based fields, that is why there's a disconnect. People get their degree, they get into the workplace, and the workplace essentially say, okay, forget everything. You're going to start from scratch. I think our degree is less so because of the integration of psycho. Psycho comes, they're like, listen, we want more X, Y, Z. You know, the degree changed now with this year's second years, last year's first years. Yes. So all the module names changed, and they got a new module called BUS. That came from industry and like firms that went to psycho and said, listen, our CAs, we want more this. We want our students to be able to integrate the knowledge better, to have better soft skills. I don't know if you remember the VR sessions we did in tax. Yeah. That is literally like PwC and Ernst & Young coming and saying, listen, the students, fantastic, they have the technical knowledge, but they don't know the small stuff, how to interact with people, how to write reports, how to use Microsoft Word, that type of things. So because of this influx of feedback from the industry, we are basically being customized to those firms. Yes. So I think in our degree it's less so, and because we have to do articles. So by the time you're a CA, I think you're very well-rounded. You've
actually applied.
Yes, you're well-rounded.
You've certainly applied. You're qualified, actually.
Yes. So I think we are some of the lucky ones. There's students that pour their heart and soul into a 4-year degree, and they get out of there, and they sat weekends and recesses and everything trying to study all the small details, And they get into the workplace and it's like, oh, by the way, those small details change every year when the SANS standards change, or when the IFRS standards change, or when the tax law changes.
Yeah.
Like, that for me is, you are focusing on the wrong thing. And that comes back to perfection. Last year, I didn't study tax as I should have studied tax. I didn't touch the slides. I basically said, okay, cool. Take a question paper. How do they usually ask the questions? What can they ask of me? Okay, all these questions, and I pick similar questions, and like, okay, but all the answers are different. Why? I'm like, okay, cool. Go back to the legislation. So where they actually taught us legislation, I focused on that legislation, because that enabled me. I came in the test. I think it was the exam. And I'm fast on tax, so that is something not all students have, but I'm rather fast on tax. But I taught myself how to read legislation good, because I have it in the test. When you're a CA, you have the legislation. That's what you have. And I got in the test, and I didn't study estate duty. And I don't know if you remember, there was a year test where it was like, the last question was estate duty.
Yeah.
So I finished the test, the beginning of the test. Then I opened up it to estate duty. It's not a very long law.
No, it's quite short.
But it wasn't highlighted at all. I read the whole thing, and then I just made notes, and I went back and I did the question, and I think I got 100 for the question. So it's like, why study this section and it's 25% and this is the rebate when you know where to find it? I mean, that is application. It's not about knowledge, and especially now that AI is basically taking over. Knowledge is, being successful is not about having the knowledge in your head. It's knowing where to find it or who to ask to get it. That is, I think, the most important thing with our degree, well, with any professional degree, really.
Do you, what's that thing called where you just read something and you just remember it? Do you have that?
No.
Goodness gracious.
But for me, it's about making sense. I have difficulties with some of the parts in the VAT Act. I hate the VAT Act, but there's some things that seem unfair, and that for me is a problem. If I read something, I'm like, oh, okay, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like the thing where they say, there's a enterprise and a vendor.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, okay, but why is there a definition for enterprise and a definition for vendor and a definition for person, and like they're all the same thing in my mind, and that I struggled with that for a long time. And one day I just read this one sentence I don't know if it was a slide or Silco or something, that essentially talked about a plumber. They're like, oh, but the plumber is a vendor, but he can only deduct the things he used in his plumbing business. Because if he is a plumber and an astronomer, his enterprise is the plumbing. So it is, the vendor can deduct things in his enterprise.
Yeah.
I'm like, that suddenly the distinctions made sense. So it's not, I read it once, I remember it forever. It's, I read it, I processed it, and if it makes sense, I mean, if something makes so obvious sense to you, why do you stop at a red light? Why don't you just not care? Because you know that someone else is relying on that information. You don't actively think the light is red, the law says I have to stop. You're saying the light's red, if I don't stop, someone else is going to misinterpret something and hit me.
Yeah.
It's, you made sense of it.
Yeah.
So my argument is, when you start studying, attack the work and try to make sense of it. Because when you're a CA, you have to explain this work to someone else. So don't learn it, understand it. If that makes sense.
You started, when you were talking about the red light, you started to get into like some basic game theory. It's what we do in the blink of an eye. We calculate. That was a calculation that you just made. You're very logical. So you make the calculation that at the red light, there's pretty much 4 different scenarios, 2 on either end that are the same but just flipped people. So now we've got a 4-way stop. Got 4 people at a robot. So there's a scenario where it's red on the one side and it's green on the other. So you can either choose to go when you're on the red, which will cause a clash, a collision, or you can choose to stop and everyone wins.
Yes.
We survive. Or rather, they win because they got to go first, and you're at a 0 because you're not going, but you didn't die. Or you can go where you had both of you -1, you're both dead. Or you can have a situation where it's green here and it's red there, so you can choose to go, which will be your right, and you go, or you can choose to stop and someone hits you at the back. So it's all these various things that you're calculating.
Yes.
in the blink of an eye that we all just instinctually know. So you are like wired, I'm assuming, to instinctually look for things. You look for things instinctually as opposed to what most people do, and what I sometimes do is just like try and memorize.
Okay, but you didn't memorize your mother telling you don't touch the stove when it's on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's also a calculation you're doing.
Yes.
But you maybe did ask the question why.
Mm-hmm.
So how I usually approach anything is I try to break it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, here's this law, here's this thing, here's this provision. Why does it say that? There's this general rule. Okay, what happens when I put a too large number in? What happens when I put a negative number in? What happens if these two numbers are the same? What happens if they should be the same but they're not the same? I explore the edges and I try to break it, and then usually by getting a result that doesn't seem right, I'm like, oh, okay, they implemented this rule because it prevents this. Okay, now I understand the rule. I don't have to study the rule, but if I get in a test and I get a situation where the number is too high, I'm like, okay, but this will cause a wrong mistake because I've tried that before.
Yeah.
There is a rule to prevent this, and it's something I think I found it there, and I would go find it, for example. So I usually try to break things and understand them, but a lot of that calculation is instinctive, and that's why I tell students make mistakes. Okay, you once, I don't know, going back to the stove example, maybe touch the stove.
Yeah.
And it hurt.
Yeah.
And this example I give a lot of students is you don't, if you're going to touch the stove, think, oh, if I touch this, the kinetic energy of the molecules will be transferred into my hand and it will not be pleasant. You sort of just have this instinctual, well, yeah, shouldn't do that. So I don't know why, but shouldn't do that. It's an instinct. Okay. That instinct came from making a mistake and your mind saying never again.
Or watching someone make a mistake.
That's
wisdom.
But that's wisdom. That's not everyone. If you don't care about the person,
yeah,
if you can't empathize with them and put yourself in their shoes, you won't get any value out of that.
If you can empathize with yourself, so I've always sort of wanted to look at things from that view. Okay, I don't have to go through it. If you think about where you want to go, if you want to be the furthest you can possibly go with the finite amount of time you have, you don't want to make all the mistakes. So if you're empathetic of yourself, your future self, you're actually going to think that guy got burnt on the stove. I don't want to get burnt because I know that's going to make a sore thing that I saw him get, so I'm not going to do it.
That's actually very, that could perhaps be the reason why some people make the same mistake more than once. They don't, I don't want to, not exactly, but they don't value themselves enough to say, I don't want that to happen to me again. I mean, subconscious, there's a rule, where did I read that? I think it was a Jordan Peterson book, 12 Rules for Life. The one where it says, treat yourself like a person in your care.
Oh yeah.
That I think it comes back to that.
Yeah.
If you see a future, if you plan a future for yourself, you're like, I want to be this person, I want to drive that car, I want to be happy, I want to be able to do this. If you don't care for yourself and provide the opportunities for yourself to get you there, you're failing yourself. And I think people who value themselves enough to go out of their way to make opportunities for themselves, to study, to give themselves something to get there, I think that's like a hidden success factor. I think if you analyze successful people, they will value themselves. Not necessarily, I want it for me, but they will look at other people, look at what's going wrong with them and what's going right, and pick the best out of that, what they're seeing, for themselves. And try to aim towards that. I think that empathizing with yourself is actually a valid argument to make.
Like you said it in that way, treat yourself like someone in your own care.
In your own care, yeah.
Like thinking forward, thinking, okay, in 10 years' time, is the way I'm eating right now going to connect with who I am in 10 years? Like I know, oh my goodness, if I'm not doing something right now, 10 years in time,
nothing's going to change.
Like nothing is going to change.
Exactly. You're going to sit exactly just here on your bed and it's going to be the same.
And I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid that nothing is going to change. I'm afraid that I'm going to go back, I'm afraid I'll regress. I'm even learning about myself now. You said this thing is just crazy. You break things. The key is to break. That's the key. Like,
yes,
in this game.
But it's to know how to break, because it comes back to purpose. Something happens, there's a rule, there's a custom, there's anything. You need to figure out what the purpose is, and then try to go to all the limits. And if a limit doesn't make sense, or usually when you go to a limit, you'll understand it. Like complex math as well. What would the English be? I think English it's AP math. We call it alpha maths in Afrikaans. There were complex things that most people just studied the steps.
Yes.
Like just do the steps, okay? I got a math book, and tried to understand, but why calculus why did Newton create calculus like he did? I'm like trying to solve the problems as he solved them. And then I look at his answers, and I'm like, okay, but why? And then I throw curveballs at it. And if I can break it and understand the rule, I'm happy. If I exhaust myself and I can't break it, but I've put in so much effort on this problem and it's still producing the right answer, at that point, usually I accept it. And then you won't forget it, because you've obsessed over this thing for so long, it's stuck with you. So you're either going to break it and understand the reason, or you're going to accept it because you couldn't disprove it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And that sort of, and for me, purpose again, because a lot of people, they think, oh, the law says X, Y, Z. Go back to the traffic light example. Traffic lights aren't enforced by law. It's not the law that says, now you stop, now you go. It's not, okay, this guy can be early to work and you're going to be late to your lecture because you just happen to catch the red light. The traffic light is a communication system between this lane and this lane. It's telling everyone here, everyone agrees to the rules. And by doing that, if you see it becomes green, you can accept that they're going to stop. You have communicated with them that I'm going to go now. If you go, there's going to be an accident. If it becomes orange or yellow, whatever, you're going to slow down because you have now communicated with all the other cars that you understand it's their turn. It's not a law thing. It's a communication thing.
Or you speed up.
It's like, yeah, okay, but if there were self-driving cars, there wouldn't be traffic lights.
Yeah.
Because the cars could communicate with themselves.
Yeah.
I'm going to slow down slightly now so you can go past. Okay, but I'm going to speed up so you can. But we can't do that. So we use traffic lights as an analog just to communicate. So the moment, sometimes if you just look at it out of a different light, you'll realize, oh, but that makes sense. I don't have to break it.
Yeah.
It just makes sense that it's not a rule. It's the reason for it is X, Y, Z, and I can accept that.
The thing is, if we don't break for most things, I think there's, what is there really that, I think there's just so few things that breaking won't help ascertain.
Yes.
There's so few.
Breaking works for, we're not condoning violence, by the way. Like, don't go say, but why does this glass look like this smash? But like breaking rules or breaking, I think, customs as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of things like facts. I don't know, and I think I got this, well, actually both my parents are like that, but I would sometimes tell them a fact, like the napkin ring problem. I would tell my mother the napkin ring problem. And she would say, no, I don't accept that. Like, I can prove it mathematically. No, it doesn't make sense. Like, all the inputs I receive, I question. And I think especially with like deep fakes and this, the thing we did in one of the modules, but essentially fake news that's spreading misinformation where opinions seem more important than fact. Being able to question everything, that all your inputs, is so important.
Yeah.
Because now something happens and you don't accept that and you try to understand why by exploring the limits and breaking it and like, okay, but that seems fair. That rule makes sense. That fact seems right. That doesn't seem like fact. Okay, you can disprove things. And by doing, I don't do that for everything. No one really does. Okay,
it's hard.
But if you do that enough, you sort of build up a professional judgment, and you have this gut feeling that's right most of the time.
Yeah.
Most professionals, I work with an Excel competition. I've spoken with people like Renier Wessels, and he's sort of when I met him, I'm like, this is sort of who I pictured I want to be in 10 years. Like, I'm like, oh, cool.
yeah.
It's nice to meet you. But he has this professional judgment on a lot of things. And there's this knowledge. But even if he doesn't know something, his input is still valuable. Because he tried to explore the limits and break things and try to really understand things. He sort of got this judgment to know how to approach a problem, even if he doesn't know what the answer even should remotely look like.
And isn't that the goal?
Yes, that's
because
exactly
nothing
the goal.
is, or rather, there will always be problems that have never been solved.
Yes.
There will always be those.
I mean, that is life.
Life.
There were problems when we were in caves and we had to hunt, and then someone was like, if I smash these rocks, we have fire. And like, oh my! And if we smash the rocks, we have something sharp.
Oof.
And now the problem is how do you run fast enough? Eventually, we got so much food with fertilizer that was, I think 1930s they made nitrogen, phosphorus, and I don't know.
NPK.
Kalium. What's that? Potassium.
Potassium.
It's K. In Afrikaans, it's kalium. English is potassium. It doesn't make sense. But anyway.
Wait. It's K. So it makes sense.
It makes sense in Afrikaans. I was like, what's the English word K something? I'm like, potassium. It doesn't make sense. But anyway, when that happened, food were abundant. Before that was actually the point where people were afraid of overpopulation. Most scientists didn't really worry about overpopulation after that point. Because before that point, the math didn't check out. There wasn't going to be enough food. This German chemist figured out how to synthetically produce this stuff. There was more than enough food. Okay, we still have problems with food. There's enough, but it is supply chain issues. It's what type of food. It's people wanting diverse choices in food. And then it is, we have monocultures of food, of bananas and of corn and everything. So a single parasite will decimate basically all the crops in the world. So we solved the problem. And yet, by solving this problem, 4 more appear. And that is like the point. When I was really young, I remember we were at Makru, and I told my dad, I'm like, I figured it out. The people that get paid the most solve problems. I thought it was genius. He's like, yeah, obviously. But my argument was, a pilot, technically, he takes off. Ding. Now, with Airbus has this new AI system called Dragonfly, and it can do amazing things, but they input headings, they verify everything, and they are the final check, pilots basically. So they do constant monitoring, the fuel levels, making sure nothing happens. But technically, if you do nothing, you take off, dunk, do nothing, and you land, you would technically get there on time. So why is the pilot there? You are paying the pilot a lot of money because if a problem pops up, he should solve it. The doctor solves a problem. The manager, and I realized this because my dad was a manager. And I thought manager was, you tell people what to do, you scream on people, movie stuff.
Boss.
All day, the phone just rang. He has a home office. The phone just rang constantly. He was constantly on the phone. The phone rang, it's a distributor, they have an issue. Then the phone rang, it's supply chain, they can't do that. Then his managers call, then you have to call the salespeople. Then that. Everyone just phones him with problems and he solves them. I'm like, this is sort of the top tier. There's inventors and stuff, people that figure things out, but management, even because back then he wasn't high management, okay, but he was a problem solver. That's it. You take a look at pilots or doctors or engineers or people high up in management, people that get paid the most. The CEO of a company technically can do nothing. He doesn't really. If he pauses for a month, I don't think there would be a noticeable effect. If the CEO of ShopRite didn't show up for work anymore, would you as a customer know for a year? You would eventually start knowing because there won't be any strategic goals for the company. But short term,
but that's the breakdown of the company. So I really believe in tone at the top. Yes, I believe in that champagne waterfall. That's the picture that I have of your leader. He needs to overflow, or she needs to overflow.
But if he had overflown and the structure is built, if he stops
that's
in the
different.
short term, will you notice? Not really. I mean, there will be deterioration. There will be intrinsic value loss that will eventually catch up with the company and it will be bad. But short term, not a lot's going to change.
That is if systems were in place. That's
okay,
the big
but
key.
Let's assume everything's perfect as it is and we just take them out. Nothing.
Everything's
really
perfect as
changes,
it is.
Yeah.
What? Okay, we're in South Africa now, right?
Okay, because if all the structures in the company work.
Okay.
You take out the CEO. Will you notice for a month?
No.
Will you notice for a year? Maybe.
Maybe.
At a year, maybe. Shareholders will obviously notice, but the customers?
Maybe not.
Maybe not even a year, maybe in 5 years. When they're
Maybe
like,
not.
this process doesn't work, they don't have milk anymore, what's going on? Because the supply chain broke down. But the thing is, that strategic goals, that isn't really a full-time job, is it?
No.
That is you work with a lot of people and you figure things out. But why does the CEO show up every day? Because problems, and he solves them. And CEOs get paid millions because in a good company, the problems flow up.
Yeah.
You never blame. You shouldn't blame the employee. It is the employee's problem becomes the manager's problem becomes.
Yeah.
So at the end, all the big problems usually get solved, the higher it goes, and the big problems hit the CEO.
Yeah. Oof.
They just solve problems every day. If you watch these shows, Designated Survivor, the president.
I watched it.
It's this basically apocalypse happens. The US government's gone, and the one US government official that's hid away in a bunker is now president and has to figure things out. Okay, but there's this episode where he wakes up and everything's calm, and when he opens his bedroom door, it's just million people coming to him with problems, and it's just problems whole day until he goes to sleep. And that is, I feel, where the money, well, not the money lies, but the value lies.
The value lies there.
But because you are the problem solver. And how can you solve a problem if you just know something? You can't. Learning something in a textbook and writing it on a sheet of paper, that isn't really education. But being able to look at a lot of different issues and be able to get that judgment to when something is better than something else gives you the ability to solve problems. And that is what CA is. That is why it is a difficult degree. And they try to say, okay, if we make the test this difficult, the students by studying will automatically get about average or about that level of judgment. Okay, we want this judgment, so we need to push the test up. So the tests aren't difficult because the tested material makes you a CA. Throwing you under the tested material will put you in a situation where you need to build that judgment, and that'll make you a CA. So
Building judgment.
building that professional judgment. I think that is everything, is that judgment. Knowing where to find the answer. Because the CA isn't the tax expert. I mean, if you go to PwC, there's the audit partner, but they have a specialist on IFRS 16 and a specialist on IFRS 9 and a specialist on, okay? Then there's the consolidation specialist, okay? And then there's the IT specialist and the tax person who got a master's degree in tax, okay? But the partner is still a CA. They are the glue that holds everything together because they could look at a situation and say, listen, we need tax expert. I can see this problems. To solve it, we need someone to tell us the specifics on this and this and this, and that's how we're going to apply it. But how do you test that? I can't give you a test to say, okay, do you have the judgment necessary for second year auditing? Check you passed. So I need to give you a test that is built on regurgitation. So I know a lot of people online, they're like, oh, so tests are broken. Yes, it is. Tests are broken. But if you want to be able to pass the amount of students that want to pass, that could pass, you can't really do away with a system that can at least approximate knowledge by marking the regurgitation of stuff.
I was really curious. Obviously, your accolades, they speak to your relationship with excellence. Everyone has a relationship with it, whether it's far, whether it's close, whether it's weak, whether it's strong. Like just looking at your accolades, it's clear that yours is strong. What does excellence mean to you?
You have and that ideal person, that ideal version of yourself you have. Okay, if you study for a test and the test is Friday, and you're going through the material and you sort of plan it out, you're like, okay, I have to do this topic here, this topic here, and you go through it and you get ahead of yourself. You're like, I'm done. I understood this topic so fast. I'm starting with tomorrow's topic. You go to bed at night. You're like, I'm so far ahead of my schedule. I'm going to make it. I'm going to have extra time to recap the extra stuff. I'm going to do great in this test. I think you apply that same mental math. You have this ideal version of yourself. I want to be this. And a lot of times you don't have the full picture. You're like, somewhere in the next 10 years, I want to be the best Excel person in South Africa. Okay. That's just one facet of you, but you strive towards that. And you sort of mentally already have a road you're thinking you're going to take. If you push yourself and you get accomplishments, whether it's actual accomplishments or you get something right alone at night, the thing works and you have no one to tell, but you're so excited, that is when you start to feel that is excellence, when you get ahead of your planned journey. And that is when you adjust your plan, obviously. But if you continue to push yourself, and you can continue to keep up with your expectations of yourself. Excellence isn't something that someone else can give you. It's not an award. It is something, it's the feeling of self-worth you get from accomplishing something. And it can be something small, doing woodworking, building something, figuring a problem out, or anything, or spending time with your friends and family. If that's important to you, and you did that and you feel, that was a good day, I am closer to who I want to be. That is excellence. It isn't necessarily getting an award.
What you said just now was, it gave me chills. When you do more than what you planned.
Yes.
Because a business plan it's that decorative document for a lot of people, but it's that document that we at least have to benchmark our performance to.
Yes.
At all times. It should be a minimum.
Yeah,
it should be. But there's something about, I don't know what it is, but there's something within us that keeps on not going beyond that. It's interesting, your definition of excellence, because a lot of people's is like, I get a 90. So it's like the world's idea of
what excellence should be.
Of what excellence should be.
But there's also the goal you put yourself, you give yourself, I want a 90.
Yeah.
But secretly, you're going to get like a 69, all right? If you get a 70, you're not going to be happy, but you're going to be content. You're going to be like, okay, that was good. If you get a 75, you're like, I aim for a 90. I secretly expect that I'm going to get high 60s. I got a 75. I'm really happy. If you get an 80, that's incredible. So sometimes it's you set a goal. If you meet that goal, that's excellence. But excellence is actually if you surprise yourself. If you have a kid and you think, but the kid's going to do X, Y, Z, and the kid does better, does incredible in math, you're going to be so proud of that kid. And if you're a person you have to care for, you sort of have expectations for yourself subconsciously. And they are a lot lower than the expectation you expressly want to give yourself. You're like, I want to be this. You secretly expect you're going to be this. If you're anything above that, you're going to feel satisfied because you're going to feel like you have grown. You have got that much growth. And if you meet your actual goal, you have seen growth. But there's a CGP Grey, the Cortex podcast, where they speak about their yearly goals.
Okay.
And it's essentially, they say, don't have a New Year's resolution, have a yearly theme. It's not, I should go to the gym 4 times a week. New Year's resolution. That's going to be broken. No, it is year of health. Every choice you make should not be hard swing towards health. It should be in that direction. It should be that thing where they say, 1 to the power of 365, or 1.01 to the power of 365 is like 40 something. It's a high number. Yeah. It's a small incremental constant change. If it is year of health for you, if you want to pick something to eat, you go to a place to buy something, it is, it's year of health, I'm going to get the healthy option. It's year of health, I'm going to put less sugar in my coffee. I don't know what to do, I'm going to go for a run. You can't fail at that. Yeah. But you are not saying, this is my road. You're saying, this is my direction. Yeah. And you can fail and things are going to happen, it's going to throw you. But that's you're going to move in that direction. And if you set a goal for yourself, I want 90. If you don't get 90, that doesn't make you a failure. Because the fact that you set a goal for yourself, you have moved in that direction. And you are now above what you would have been or what you secretly expected of yourself. Then you have achieved excellence because you have surprised what you expected of yourself. You have to surprise yourself.
Oh my goodness, Pieter, I want to go on with the thought. guys, this is episode 1 of many with this guy. I can already see it. And I hope that you can go with these thoughts, mull on them. I think they're big. I think they can go so much further and they're really inspiring. Pieter, you have something in you. I'm sure it's something that you've always had that is going to add so much value to this profession.
That's the dream. That's one of the goals.
But guys, I hope you enjoy. Please like, comment. If you have not already, please, as a belief, please, ndacela, follow if you're listening. I hope that it does not end, but that it begins in CASA. See you next time.
Thanks, Arina.